Religious and traditional teachings once provided a clear framework for how to live a meaningful life. And these systems offered shared goals, principles, and a sense of belonging. And the promise of the rewards for adherence to these frameworks gave people direction and purpose. For example, on the religious side, you follow the path and the principles laid out in the doctrine. You derive meaning from the fact that you're doing so in service or worship to God, or even for the promise of a better afterlife. And even outside of the religious arena, when we lived in smaller tribes, someone needed to collect the wood, someone needed to take care of the kids, someone needed to build the houses. And in those times of scarcity, survival depended on everyone fulfilling their role within the group. For the individual, this feeling of their input being important to the survival of the group no doubt brought about a sense of purpose and meaning. Modern societies largely moved away from these traditional belief systems and tribally connected communities. Scientific thinking, skepticism, and a globally connected world have replaced them. And even the atrocities carried out in religion's names have also driven people away from places of worship. And whilst pushing past previously established beliefs has brought about progress and technological advancement, it's also left many without that foundational sense of meaning. And this isn't something completely new. In the 1950s, Rollo May wrote about how when religious tradition breaks down, people seek guiding principles elsewhere. And he observed people turning to the opinion of society for approval and external validation, climbing corporate ladders, buying status symbols, following trends, joining political movements. And perhaps this then set the stage for something or someone to fill the God-shaped hole, leading to dictatorships and subsequent terrors of Nazism and communism, for example. And today we can see a somewhat similar pattern. Maybe we could go back into living with some form of religion widespread, but we haven't managed to do it so far. And one of the things we've seemingly tried to fill that gap is politics, with both sides being convinced that their side being in power will lead to the so-called promised land. And it's clear to see that some people find focusing on politics somewhat meaningful, at least in the short term, while they argue online or at the family dinner table. But often the longer term cost of that is feeling powerless and giving your sense of autonomy over to external forces, and often those who don't have your best interests in mind. Social media also offers us the incentive of finding meaning in the opinions of society, posting to see if our latest trip or purchase is sufficiently approved of by other people to warrant a like. But with enough life experience and introspection, you probably have come to realize that society doesn't have the answers, and that most people are just as uncertain about how to live a meaningful life as you are. And when you realize this, there's only one place left to turn, and that is to yourself. Nothing can bring you peace but yourself. Nothing can bring you peace but the triumph of principles, Ralph Waldo Emerson said. Socrates said, look well into thyself. There is a source of strength that will always spring up if thou wilt always look there. And then Friedrich Nietzsche said, the individual has to always struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often and sometimes frightened, but no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. But this realization is where it gets uncomfortable. Looking inward can mean confronting the reality that you might not know who you are, what you want, what you enjoy, or what you're good at. And initially you're still left with the question of, what should I do with my life? And that's a question that's essentially asking, what could I do with my life that I would find meaningful? And this uncertainty often triggers anxiety, because you have lived your life up to that point following the path laid out for you, again by tradition or the expectations of other people, and you're now confronting the fact that you might need to take responsibility for your next moves. Some people will avoid or numb this discomfort with internet-based distraction and even more extreme measures like excessive drug and alcohol use. But none of that solves that nagging question, so you either continue living with that background sense of meaninglessness, or you start exploring. And this is the point where Rollo May says seeking self-awareness is your next best step. And this can start with asking yourself questions like, what do I want my life to look like? What kind of person do I want to be? What behaviors am I currently doing that make me feel depressed? What work do I enjoy doing? When have I felt the greatest sense of meaning previously? And going through this process in and of itself can bring a great feeling of meaning. You might feel that you're on a better path. You're maybe not fully clear yet on where you want to go, but at least you're moving and at least you're engaging with the problem itself. That might lead to something as simple as realizing you get a great sense of meaning when you're cooking for your family, reading about architecture, or working on DIY projects or something like that. Or at a more extreme level, it might lead to you realizing that your current career path is not one you want to be on, or that there are major aspects of your relationships that need to be improved. And the more self-awareness you can build, the more you can assess how your current life aligns with what you prefer it to be. But self-awareness is only the first step, and stopping at self-awareness would be like writing up a gym program only to never actually step in the gym, where you might enjoy writing up the exercises, the sets and reps, but if you don't actually do them, you won't build an ounce of muscle or strength or fitness. That is to say that in pursuit of meaning, self-reflection is necessary, but not sufficient. And the next step is to start taking action to align your reality with the insights that you've gained. Because it's not enough to recognize that your newfound interest in evolutionary psychology, you also have to go and allow yourself to start exploring it. Or it's not enough to know that your job is making you miserable. You also have to then start taking action, maybe to change it. And in doing so, self-reflection then becomes self-development. But I'm going to make an even tougher point here, where even action towards self-development may not be sufficient. And you may already recognize this if you've ever undertaken a goal that you've deemed meaningful, but ending up half-assing it in your efforts towards pursuing it. And as a result, you probably experienced some combination of becoming bored with it, or not getting the intended outcomes from it, or the feeling of dejection when you fail. And this is where the next step that I'm suggesting here comes into play. That is committing to the pursuit of excellence in those areas that you've deemed to be aligned with your interests, preferences, and prior experience of meaning. And this commitment to pursuing excellence can have a number of profound impacts. Firstly, and perhaps least important of all, is that you give yourself the best chance at achieving the actual outcomes that you're after. You're a lot more likely to achieve the physique change that you want if you commit to excellence in your training and nutrition, for example. You're more likely to get the new job if you're committed to excelling in writing your CV and prepping for the interview. And this can be gratifying in showing that your efforts are being rewarded and can lead to tangible changes in your experience of life. But I say this might be the least important aspect when it comes to meaning, because often getting the outcomes we want doesn't bring the sense of meaning that we might have expected, which is why the second impact is important. That is that there is a sense of meaning to be found in the pursuit itself, not just in the outcome. And by committing to the pursuit of excellence, every step you take towards the goal becomes imbued with meaning. For example, the training session isn't just a boring slog, it's a step in the direction of creating the body that you want. Or reading the textbook isn't just a task to be ticked off, it's a building block towards a more intelligent version of yourself. Or the hard conversation with your partner isn't just an argument, it's a means of improving your relationship. That means that your sense of meaning isn't dependent on some future uncertain outcome, but it's woven into your daily life. To bring a touch of overly simplified neuroscience in, your brain's dopamine levels increase when you take action in pursuit of a preferred outcome. And in simple terms, more dopamine equals more motivation, equals an increased sense of feeling of meaning in the pursuit. Thirdly, the pursuit of excellence offers more opportunity for flow states. And flow is that state of complete immersion where time seems to disappear and you're fully engaged with what you're doing. And we could easily say that this feeling is an example of the sense of meaning, in that the activity itself becomes so meaningful that nothing else seems to matter. And this state is achieved, according to its originator, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, when the demands of a task are such that you're required to operate at close to the limits of your skills. And that is when your skills are being stretched to their limits. And think about the last few minutes of a football match when the scores are even and you're doing everything you can to get on the ball and set up a scoring opportunity, or when you're working on a task at work that requires every bit of your concentration. The pursuit of excellence, by definition, offers more opportunity for you to be at that limit. That means more opportunity for flow state and a sense of meaning associated with that. And fourthly, the pursuit of excellence becomes a habit. The attitude that you take to one area of your life, whether consciously or subconsciously, often carries over into other areas of your life. So you've probably noticed that when you're consistent with your training, and you usually end up eating better too as a result. Or you probably also end up getting to bed earlier, getting to work on time, being more present with your family. And as a result, not only do these tangible things improve, but with each area within which you're pursuing excellence, the feeling of meaning expands further into these various areas of your life. And then last and not least, the pursuit of excellence can bring more meaning to even mundane tasks that don't necessarily feel aligned with your self-awareness driven preferences and goals. And as you'll have picked up by now, the ideal scenario would be to always be engaged in activities that you want to be doing and pursuing excellence in those activities. But that's not the reality. The dishes have to be washed, work tasks include administrative work, meal prep needs sorted. There are tasks that don't necessarily have this grand sense of meaning built in. But if you can take some elements of pursuing excellence into these things, within reason obviously, maybe they can become more bearable. Maybe you start to see how efficient you can be with the dishwashing process, or next time you're doing work admin, you set up a system that makes the process more streamlined, or you decide to put a bit more effort into making your meal prep that bit tastier. And in doing so, each individual task may feel slightly more bearable, knowing that it is building up your self-identity to be more in line with the pursuit of excellence. At the very least, they become a chance to practice this excellence. Now, as a final note, I feel it's important to highlight the downside of the pursuit of excellence. That is that it's difficult. It's more work to go all in on pursuing your fitness goals than it is to half-ass it or not do it at all. You'll likely be doing more sessions. Sessions themselves would be harder. You'd require more discipline with your nutrition, or it's less painful in the short term to let resentment build up in your relationships than it is to have tough conversations. Or it's easier to do the minimum work to get by in your job. Yes, it is harder to pursue excellence, at least in the short term, but it's not as if the alternative is better. Half-assed training efforts lead to not having the body you want. Unaddressed relationship issues build resentment. Low effort in your job leaves you getting overlooked for promotions. So there will be suffering either way, whether it's the suffering associated with the hard efforts necessary to pursue excellence, or the suffering of not having the outcomes you want because you don't go after these things fully. So suffering is inevitable, but meaning is not. So by committing to the pursuit of excellence, the suffering still remains, but hopefully it's worth it for the sense of meaning that comes along with it. Thanks for listening. If you'd like more free resources or info about my performance nutrition coaching program, hit the link in the podcast description.